Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme song is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss, and my name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. We've got another double-stuffed week in the news. Game on! The Iran peace deal falls apart. Trump treks to Turkey for a NATO summit and attempts to put his fat thumb on soccer's scales. Graham Plattner's political career is dead. Mitch McConnell might be. And here comes Lindsey Graham on the outside, overtaking McConnell in the race to hell. Plus, Beckwith Bellows bigotry and plenty of other Indiana stories. All that and more. But before we begin, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We certainly don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in our state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. Get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it's PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Now, let's welcome this week's guest. First, a newcomer to this space. She is the Democratic candidate set to slay State House Speaker Todd Houston in November. It's Lauren Cole. Lauren, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. Welcome to the greater Who's Left universe. It is an honor to have you joining us this morning.
Thanks. Very excited to be here.
And also returning guest. He's an activist, organizer, and my DSA comrade. There's Bryce Green. Bryce, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Scott.
Always great to have you here. It was great to have you last time. One of my favorite guests so far. Shush, don't tell the others. So listen, we've got a lot we've got to dig into today. So let's go ahead and, get right into it. And, after months of on-again, off-again fighting, it looked like the U.S. and Iran had found an off-ramp, reaching a 60-day memorandum of understanding about 3 weeks ago, during which the two sides would cease fire and negotiate a more durable peace. And despite occasional flare-ups, the deal mostly held until this week. Iran struck several ships using an unapproved southern route hugging the Omani coast in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. responded, launching attacks on Iranian sites, drawing retaliation by the Islamic Republic on Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Jordan, American allies in the region. On Thursday, Iranians buried their assassinated supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, in Mashhad, with U.S. strikes hitting road and rail bridges on the route to the city. Mourners carried signs saying death to Trump and Netanyahu as the president renewed threats to hit civilian infrastructure. Gee, I don't know why they don't like the guy. And the rhetoric ramped up even further Saturday as Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, vowed to avenge his father's death, and Trump responded on True Social that 1,000 missiles are locked and loaded and aimed at the Islamic Republic of Japan. Okay, he didn't say that in the post, but he did slip and say those words out loud at one point this week, with thousands more to immediately follow should the Iranian government act on its threat. Tanker traffic has once again slowed in the Strait after ramping up in June. Shipping traffic through the vital waterway is down more than 80% from this time last year. And even since I've put together the script for this morning's show, there's been more strikes overnight with both sides trading missile and drone attacks. Great stuff, Bryce. The U.S. empire near its end, reduced to trading insults and threats like playground bullies.
No, it's absolutely ridiculous to see. And the Islamic Republic of Japan comment really underscores that all of these missiles, all of these, this talk about nukes that even came up, all this talk of bombing civilian infrastructure is being led by a literally demented person. Trump, who is not known for his sanity in his most clear days, he's losing it, right? I think everyone understands that he's losing it. But it makes him perfect conduit for the interests of the military industrial complex, the Israel lobby, and the financiers and the empire planners who want this war to continue. The reason that this war is happening, and you can find all sorts of justifications across the political spectrum. We want to protect the Middle East from Iranian nukes, blah blah blah. The reason that the war is actually happening is that Iran is powerful enough that it's able to act outside of American influence and able to ally with U.S. adversaries like China and Russia, and it's able to restrict Israel's freedom of movement to bomb and invade and occupy countries, its neighbors. This has to go. You can't stand to have an independent actor like that in the region, so we have to concoct some reason that we hate them or concoct some threat that they pose against us, and then we send in the troops. The big difference is that they are powerful enough to resist the U.S. attack. During the war, the Iranians pretty much achieved all their war aims. They successfully repelled the Americans. They actually removed Americans from the military bases that we have surrounding Iran. Why do we have those? That's another question. But they were also able to assert dominance of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical economic pathways in the world. And they did this. They're not a major military industrial power spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of $billions, trillions of dollars on the military. No, their military spending is a small fraction of ours, but because of American arrogance, they were able to beat them back. And now the Americans are starting the war again.
And they've proven, Bryce, and maybe Lauren, you can speak to this, that it doesn't take trillions of dollars in spending anymore to stand toe to toe with the American military. They're spending $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 on drones to draw out missiles that cost millions of dollars each. That is not sustainable long term. And, we can only throw so much money at it before it starts to affect the American quality of life, if it hasn't already. Our military spending is think of all the things that money could be buying.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I talk about a lot on the campaign trail. Although we don't really get into these federal issues, these issues do affect us at the state level. So, it's everything from our gas prices being raised, which of course we've had a suspension on the gas tax, which has been helpful for a time, but now, it's been unsustainable as well. And I think a lot of us are, we've been at war for a very long time in the region. And I think that we're tired of that. We're tired of throwing money away. There are definitely better things that we could be spending our money on. And every time that it seems like we're taking a step forward, we're also taking 2 steps back. So it doesn't really seem like we're reaching, an end to this conflict anytime soon. And I think that's the most concerning part is we keep having this carrot in front of us of we're almost done, negotiations are going well. And then, the ceasefire will happen and then more strikes happen. And it just keeps happening. So it makes me wonder how long we're going to be involved in this conflict and how quickly we're going to be able to recoup after it financially.
Yeah, and you mentioned the gas tax. I guess I want to talk about, why this matters to Hoosiers, as has been the case with American military intervention abroad over the last 80 years. It doesn't affect us, right? It's over there. We don't feel the actual pain and death often that comes with war, right? It hits us in the pocketbooks, and, the drastic decrease in oil shipments through the Strait has driven up prices and forced the U.S. to tap its strategic petroleum reserve, which is now at its lowest point in more than 40 years. We're really not talking about this enough. Indiana Governor Mike Braun, to your point, Lauren, has responded by rescinding the state's gas taxes, announcing last week the final 30-day extension he can enact without a special legislative session. Now, this week, we found out how much this gas tax holiday is going to cost. $533 million. $358 million of that to the Indiana Department of Transportation and $175 million to local governments. Now, Braun has pledged to make local governments whole by November 1st, but it remains unclear whether the state will tap its surplus to reimburse INDOT or let the highway fund absorb the loss. Now, Lauren, I'm sure Hoosier drivers have appreciated lower gas prices, but again, these funds are that should be going to our deteriorating roads and bridges. And that $533 million that might get pulled out of the surplus to reimburse the highway fund, that's money that could be spent on things that might improve Hoosiers' lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is one of the most difficult things to talk about because it is helpful to have the gas tax suspended. It is helpful, when I'm out campaigning and I have to fill up my car a ton, it is helpful to have lower prices. And we see this a lot during election years. We'll do short-term fixes that make people feel better about the decisions, even poor decisions that have been made in the past, because, well, now something good is happening. We see the exact same thing happening with, property tax bills coming down and those types of things. And now we're facing, budget shortfalls when it comes to public schools and other components that are really important to our local municipalities. And so there's a trade-off between trying to provide financial relief and making sure that our essential services are still funded. And we're falling short of this right now. So it's difficult to campaign in the middle of an affordability crisis and tell people that it is important to make sure that we pay enough in taxes to be able to take care of things. And of course, everything is different buckets. So it's really, it's difficult to explain, the budget as a whole on very small levels. But we're losing a lot of money and we don't really have a good plan on how we're going to pay for these things in the future. So that's the concern with that. And then, how long can we suspend the gas tax before we can't, fix the roads? And I've even heard talk that Braun is proposing making toll roads in our state to be able to pay for this. So at the end of the day, either way, we're going to be paying the tax. It's just about calling it anything but a tax. And that's what I've noticed. It's either a referendum, so it's not called a tax, or it's a toll road, so it's not called a tax, or something like that. But at the end of the day, we're going to end up paying for it anyways.
Republicans have done a very good job of branding themselves as fiscally responsible, but here we are, robbing Peter to pay Paul in that regard, and then just the poor financial planning long term, over the decades, Bryce. I keep coming back to this again and again and again. We knew the energy crisis was coming. We knew we needed to wean ourselves off oil. We knew if we, pursued renewable energy that the Middle East wouldn't be so vitally important for its oil. And yet here we are. And that's precisely because our Republicans and, far too many Democrats as well are beholden to, one, the oil and gas lobby, and to the military industrial complex.
No, you're exactly right. And one of the best ways I think that we should be understanding this gas tax as a socialized cost of this war, like in addition to the billions of dollars that were specifically authorized to go and, murder kids in Iran and bomb their desalination plants, et cetera, et cetera. On top of that, there was the cost of, the rising cost of goods. There was inflation that was associated with that. Suspending this gas tax to ensure that every state has the ability to placate its population, to blunt the effects of this kind of inflation. It's just an extension of these high costs of the war. And of course, it's all extremely short-sighted. I mean, this war is also in part a war for super profits from the military-industrial complex. It's a war for these fossil fuel companies, and it's a war for just the imperial hegemony. And so these costs for that have always been socialized to the most vulnerable people, to the public. And Indiana is especially vulnerable to that because it has one of the most regressive tax systems in the nation. And so, of course, the cost of this war in this way are going to get socialized in this way. I would love to be able to have a federal subsidy that's able to keep costs low for consumers. The only reason we have this now is because there is no federal backstop for this. The state is going to have to handle this deficit itself. And also, B, it's so important to maintaining public opinion to support the war, what little support there is, that they feel that, maybe a little socialism is in order in this case. All this to say that the health of the state, this country, has always been warfare. And it's even more insane when you consider that we have upped the Pentagon's budget to $1.5 trillion. And as NBC reported, I think last week, the Pentagon is complaining about being cash poor. They don't have any cash. How is this even possible? What sort of insanity led to this?
Yeah, they haven't passed an audit in years. They won't pass an audit for years, and who knows where the money's going. We'll talk about a little bit of the corruption along those lines here in a little bit later. But Bryce, you mentioned who this war benefits, and another beneficiary of this war, of course, is Israel. And let's talk about them for a little bit. And so this week, Hamas dissolved its government in besieged Gaza, announcing a formal handover of administrative authority to the Technocratic National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, a body created by the Trump-established so-called Board of Peace last October. Now, Hamas says all civil servants will continue to provide services as usual, and this appears to mark a significant shift by the group, though they won't commit to disarming until the committee assumes power. Israel's government has been blocking the committee from entering Gaza for months and now controls at least 60% of the enclave, having continued to expand its occupation despite the truce. Now, that's Gaza. In the West Bank, California Congressman Ro Khanna was detained for 90 minutes by armed Israeli settlers and IDF soldiers while on a fact-finding mission. Khanna, who is exploring a potential 2028 presidential run, visited multiple Palestinian towns, a school where a 14-year-old was shot by a settler, and met with the family of an activist killed by another settler. His closing lines to Israeli officials were this, quote, "It's not a good idea to detain a long-shot presidential candidate, not how you're going to build goodwill with the next American president, whoever that is." Not that the Israeli relationship with the current politically aligned administration is that great anyway. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have not seen eye to eye lately, as the U.S. had been looking for an off-ramp with Iran as Bibi seeks escalation. Well, this week, perhaps in an effort to repair the relationship, or perhaps to keep Trump engaged in the war, Israel shared intelligence with the U.S. suggesting a credible Iranian plot to assassinate Trump. Speaking at a NATO summit in Turkey, Trump said, quote, "They want to take out the U.S. leader. Me. I'm on every list. So far, I guess I've been a little bit lucky, but maybe that doesn't last very long. Inshallah." Bryce, Israel, thoughts?
Man, Israel thoughts, generally speaking, bad. This first story that you bring up about Hamas dissolving its government in favor of a technocratic, I mean, that story alone is very interesting because it kind of undermines a lot of what the propaganda was about Israel's war against Gaza, Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people. Because it's saying that Hamas is this unreasonable, evil terrorist group that can't be dealt with. You can't make a deal with them. But if you look at the actual history, I mean, their positions on almost everything is more moderate than Israel, including the ability to make deals and end the wars. They've agreed to to dissolve its own government, something that, I mean, no one would ever expect of Israel, and even though it's something that we should absolutely be demanding. But Israel's response to that, on Friday or on Thursday going into Friday, Israel launched a bunch of strikes across the Gaza Strip, killing 6 total Palestinians, injuring many others. But one of the targets of these attacks was actually one of the negotiators who had made this deal, who had made this public statement about how we're going to dissolve our government. So, they get attacked for existing, they get attacked for resisting, they get attacked for nonviolence, they get attacked when they make a deal. And when you're a moderate who makes, a peace overture, who says that, we are doing this because we don't want to give an excuse for Israel to attack us, well, Israel still attacks them. So in reality, it's Israel who you really can't make a deal with. It's Israel who's the sadistic one in this case, because throughout this whole period, since last October, they have technically been in a quote unquote ceasefire. But during that ceasefire, they've killed well over 1,000 Palestinians. They've had a ceasefire with Lebanon, with Hezbollah for, over a year. And throughout that time, they've launched numerous strikes, violated the ceasefire over 1,000 times. And at the same time, they're occupying Syria. At the same time, they're talking about how eventually they're going to want to go to war with Turkey. And of course, they're supporting the U.S. attack on Iran. This is a lunatic country. This is out of control. Nowhere in the history of the world have we seen a country attack its neighbors so frequently, so viciously, and flaunt international law with such impunity, other than maybe the Americans.
And to your point, the reputation they have though is that they are the reasonable ones, and that Hamas are terrorists and they won't negotiate, and every step of the way Israel offers carrots and then takes them away as Hamas comes in. And not to apologize for Hamas, not a great organization either, but it's very one-sided the way these things are covered. Lauren, let's move from Gaza to the West Bank, which the settlers keep encroaching there more and more and more all the time. We don't talk about that nearly enough because maybe it's not as grotesque as what they're doing in Gaza, but yet this. What's happening in the West Bank looks an awful lot like Manifest Destiny in our country and the slow encroachment of settlers on indigenous spaces. And then you see Khanna over there this week accosted by this group of settlers. And he said that, man, it really strikes you. This is a congressman who's used to having privilege, feared for his life in that situation. If Israel is completely dependent on American foreign aid for very much of what it does, they probably shouldn't be accosting our elected officials, eh?
Yeah, you would think. I do think that it's a very good thing, though, to have our representatives go and see, exactly what is happening, because sometimes we can become so far removed from the consequences of some of the decisions that we make. So I also find it interesting. I think the thing that makes this situation so much more difficult than it has been in the past when we've been in conflict is just the fact that we have a president right now whose relationships can become volatile at any moment. So, 1 minute, Trump and Netanyahu can be getting along very well. They can be cordial with each other. They can be working together. And then the next minute, that whole relationship blows up. And it's really hard to keep track of when it's a good relationship and when it's a bad relationship. And we've seen it with other, leaders of other countries as well with our president. So I am interested to see, to go back to the Gaza situation. I'm interested to see. I think that we have two different definitions of peace here, and that might be part of the reason that we're getting stuck. Hamas is saying that they're dissolving, but they don't want to disarm themselves. So that doesn't necessarily give the illusion that, they won't arm themselves again. But it also, I think when we look at the conflict as a whole, we have to really look at not necessarily what the ideology is that people say is the reason that they are there, and look at the outcome of what is happening. If Israel really was targeting Hamas specifically, then the death toll would not be as high as it is for civilians. And so I think that it begs the bigger question of, and we have issues with this in our own government, saying one thing, but then the outcome is very different from what we're saying it is. And it's a way to appeal to people. And it's not lost on me that Israel has been an ally to us in the past, but there does come a point where we can't just support, we have issues supporting other allies for various reasons under President Trump. So I find it interesting that we don't have issues supporting this ally right now while an active cleansing is happening. So I don't know, there's a lot going on, and it changes every day.
Yeah, no, if you got that buddy you'd like to go hang out at the bar with, he's a good time, but then he likes to start fights with everybody, and then you have to step in and deal with it. Like, at some point, that dude's not fun to hang out with anymore. So let's stay in the Middle East and sort of work our way home here. I mentioned that Trump was at this NATO summit in Turkey this week. While there, he announced a deal allowing Ukraine to manufacture its own Patriot missile defense systems under license, signaled he may lift sanctions and restore sales of F-35 fighter jets to the host country, and reportedly authorized new Iran strikes from the summit dinner table. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte refused to rule out a future role for the alliance in the Iran conflict. Now, on the way home, the president made news by departing not in his new Air Force One, a Qatari-donated Boeing VC-25B, but in the 35-year-old Boeing VC-25A. The New York Times reported the change was urged by the Secret Service as a security precaution, perhaps due to that Iranian assassination threat that we talked about. The old 747 reportedly carries several defensive systems that the new jet could not possibly have been equipped with in the time it took to retrofit the gifted plane. And Friday, the 4 Times journalists that reported on the switch found themselves subpoenaed by Trump's Department of Justice, with federal agents showing up at some of their homes. A lawyer for the Times called it a, quote, brazen act intended to intimidate journalists, and the gray lady now finds itself embroiled in several legal battles with the administration. So I guess, Lauren, I want to start with the summit itself. We've got allies kind of sniping with each other. We mentioned, Bryce mentioned Israel and Turkey not really liking each other that much. Well, we got 2 U.S. allies here, within the alliance, and Trump maybe wants to allow Turkey to have these advanced fighter jets. Israel, not a fan of that. But hey, him and Erdogan are big buddies. They have that same kind of authoritarian strongman streak in them. And then, there's the Ukraine angle as well. That war is, maybe I'll come to you on this in a second, Bryce. Maybe you can speak to the sort of split in the left on Ukraine. But Lauren, your thoughts on this NATO summit?
Yeah, I mean, it just becomes more clear every single day that there really isn't a strategy or a plan. And I think that might be one of the reasons it's so hard to follow these things, is just because it really depends on the day who we're going to be making a deal with and what we're going to be doing. Also, wasn't he like calling in strikes from the dinner table?
As one does.
I find, as one typically does.
You haven't?
I mean, yeah, no, I've never personally called in a strike during dinner, but I don't know. I mean, I'm just like not surprised or shocked anymore when I see things go poorly, really important things, and there just really seems to be no plan, I guess is what I can say.
Yeah. Bryce, Ukraine, Trump's been sort of back and forth on this. He's got an affinity for Putin, as we all know. He called Zelensky Putin on multiple occasions during their meeting this week. But also it now seems that he's moving in that direction and allowing the Ukrainians to manufacture Patriot missiles there under license. Their drone technology, they've really become a world leader in this, fighting off a larger power in much the same way Iran is fighting off the United States. The left has been sort of split on the Ukraine issue. Now, I'm of the opinion that, you fight imperialism everywhere, whether it's American imperialism or Russian imperialism, but a lot of folks see Ukraine and NATO as sort of an extension of U.S. imperialism. What do you think?
Well, yes, the left has been very split on Ukraine, and I come at it from a perspective of understanding how we got here as the best way to understand how we should go forward. And the root of the Ukraine war is, it started because in 2014 the U.S. overthrew the government, which caused a civil war in the country, which caused Russia to get more involved. And rather than negotiate to end the civil war, the Americans and the West and NATO, they poured more weapons into the country and forestalled any negotiations. And what really precipitated Russia's full-scale invasion was America's open threat of inviting Ukraine into NATO, which meant more military bases, more missiles, and more troops on Russia's border, something that Russia found intolerable. When it became clear that the U.S. was not going to negotiate, even though the Russians explicitly asked, that's when the Russian invasion happened. Now, you can say that the Russian policy of invading a country and mass murder is immoral, and you would be very correct to say so. But to alleviate the responsibility of the U.S. and the West on this is, of course, ridiculous. And many Western officials have said repeatedly that their goal with Ukraine was to use this country to fight Russia. And if you talk with dead bozos like Lindsey Graham, he says the same thing. He says the reason that the Ukraine war has been such a benefit to Americans is because they are able to inflict costs on Russia without using any American lives. The Ukrainian lives, if you look at the videos, I mean, there's young men being drafted on the street, ripped from their homes and placed in the vans and then shipped to the front lines. This is what the Americans are considering a policy success. Now, there's this myth that the Trump administration has been very cozy with Putin vis-a-vis Ukraine. And I think it stems back to the whole Russiagate thing of 2016. But if we actually look at what Trump's policy has been vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia, it has been to continue almost exactly by the Biden administration's policy of actively supporting the war. I mean, the strikes that Ukraine did into Russia and continues to do into Russia, those wouldn't be possible without U.S. intelligence. In fact, much of the Ukrainian battlefield tactics and strategy are being closely coordinated with NATO and American military actors. And so this idea that Trump is somehow helping Putin against Ukraine is really laughable. There was a strain in the right-wing media that was also, anti-Ukraine war, anti-U.S. support for Ukraine. And so Trump made allusions to them, made overtures to them, but the overarching policy has been largely the same. And like Lauren said, there is no real plan, right? There's no way out for this. The only path is endless escalation, which with the nuclear power could obviously lead to the end of the world. The only sensible option is negotiation, which Trump seems uninterested in.
Yeah, it's like, what you mean? Trump talks out of both sides of his mouth. I'm shocked. And this Air Force One thing is I think a perfect illustration of just the Trump administration and their tomfoolery, right? You've got this Qatari jet which was gifted to him corruptly. He's going to be taking it with him when he leaves. They slap a new coat of paint on it, adorn it with like a nice leather interior, but it doesn't have all the stuff you actually need for it to serve as Air Force One, and potentially the Iranians knew this and may have been attempting to strike it, and that is why he had to scurry back home in his old plane, and then makes up excuses as to why, and then attacks the press for reporting it. Lauren, I can't think of anything more Trumpian. It is a perfect encapsulation of all he's about.
Yeah, definitely. I just read that story this morning about the journalists that are being subpoenaed for putting out this story, and I was actually going to ask you: was it like they're claiming it's a security issue that they had reported on it?
I would assume that's their angle. It's very, very hush hush at this point. But this is not the first time they've done this. Is subpoena journalists basically to figure out who their source is, who's leaking this information to them from the Pentagon. I think it's less about the journalists themselves. I mean, now, sure, there's the element of intimidating the press, but I think they're mostly trying to root out who the rat is on the inside. Right. At least that's the way they would look at it. So I want to stay on this. Trump's corrupt aircraft entanglements don't end with the Air Force One, which I should add, like I said, is going to be transferred to his presidential library after his time in office. This does not stay with the next president. This week, he also announced the construction of a new granite helipad on the White House South Lawn, saying Lockheed Martin will pay the $6 million cost. Now, apparently, the new Sikorsky helicopters that have been acting as Marine One have been scorching the lawn with their exhaust, necessitating the helipad. And Lockheed, felt a little bit guilty over the situation. But it should be noted, this is a corporation whose revenue depends almost entirely on government contracts, donating to Trump's beautification project when they depend on his administration's goodwill for their survival. Now, in addition to this helipad and the Rose Garden and the Presidential Walk of Fame and the East Wing demolition for his ballroom. Trump is also undertaking a fortification of the North Portico at the Executive Mansion, with tarps now covering scaffolding as the columns undergo restoration. Between these projects on the White House grounds and others across the nation's capital city, the price tag has ballooned to over $1.2 billion, most of that reportedly funded by taxpayers. And one of the most visible of these boondoggles, the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, was again drained this week so repairs could be made to the original shoddily completed renovation. The administration has blamed the poor workmanship performed by Trump associates on no-bid contracts on vandals, despite zero evidence. Lauren, this is going to come up again. Everything the man touches turns to shit.
Yeah, and they just lie about it. And I think that's the hardest part, you know, when I'm out door to door and we're talking about these things with voters, it's so difficult because they will perpetuate the lies that they've been told. And the only way to go about it is to tell them that it's not true. I also find it interesting that we're saying that taxpayers aren't funding projects when taxpayers fund the companies that fund the projects. I mean, again, it's a roundabout way to say that it's not a tax. And we talk a lot about this reflecting pool, and this just gets down to more of the lies. You know, we point fingers at other people. Oh, it was this person that, you know, caused the damage, when in reality it was the contractors and we didn't do it the right way the first time. But those contractors seem to have ties to the president. So now we pay them again to do the same work over again that failed the first time. And it feels very corrupt. It feels like, you know, they're pointing fingers at other people so that we don't look up. And this is something that I say all the time on the campaign trail. If they can convince us that the issue is each other, then we don't spend enough time looking up to see what they are doing. So we are redoing the reflecting pool less than a month after we did it the first time. And it's costing us money to do so. But we're not looking at that and we're not paying attention to that because so many other things are happening and they're getting us convinced to fight with each other instead, and to get us to fight over silly things like the algae bloom, right? That's not really the issue. The issue is not really that, you know, we have these restorations happening. It's the fact that there's an affordability crisis, and while we're cutting social services, we're paying for, you know, cosmetics, and that it feels very, you know, almost dystopian in a way to be looking up at the Capitol and watch them flaunt all of this, you know, money and financial security. And I mean, even Trump himself said that he doesn't care about affordability for American people. And it's very obvious with what we're choosing to spend our money on, and more importantly, what we're choosing not to spend our money on.
Yeah, and Bryce, like to Lauren's point, it's gilded crap. It is a facade in front of corruption. Hey, look at this stuff while they're picking our pockets.
No, you're exactly right. And, you know, Lauren, you said it was almost dystopian. I just say it's straight up dystopian. I mean, it's been the case since the start. I mean, I'm sure you talked about the recent reports called MAGA Inc. About all the different corporations that are just getting enriched off of the Trump administration's blatant corruption. And honestly, calling it corruption is kind of like, it feels passé at this point because it's just the norm. It's not like a corruption of the process. It's how these people make their money. Go back to Trump coin at the start of 2025. It's just a blatant SEC violation, crypto rug pull against his own supporters that netted him over $1 billion. Who's looking into that? Who's gonna do anything about that? All these the Trump Juniors connections with either Kalshi or Polymarket, one of those like infernal organizations, total blatant corruption. Lockheed Martin just paying into the presidential like the presidential palace fund. I mean, that's just blatant corruption. And a lot of people like to talk about how the Trump administration embodies American fascism. And they focus on things like these paramilitary ICE guys running around, the racist nationalism that's running around. But if we look at fascism, especially in, you know, Mussolini's Italy and Hitler's Germany, from a structural economic perspective, what was really going on was that the corporations, a very strong wing of the corporate class in those countries, they found in Mussolini, in Hitler, and now in Trump, a very good ally against the working class. and they found a very good way to capture the state by pouring money into enriching individual Nazi party members, individual fascist party members, for the as the price of their loyalty, basically. And then they had their henchmen as attack dogs. So Trump is a henchman for Lockheed Martin, the Israel lobby, and other other corporate centers, the crypto industry especially, and he's doing their bidding, and he's been able to do their bidding for quite some time. This is what fascism is. It's the ultimate form of the class war, the war against the capitalists, against the working class.
Trump is the logical extension of where we've been headed. You know, I think that too many folks think that he is some sort of anomaly, that he is this aberration, when in fact we've been slowly legalizing corruption in this country for the last 40 to 50 years, and only by doing that do we arrive at the place of Trump. You go to Citizens United, you go 35 years before that to like the Buckley and Vallejo decisions by the Supreme Court and the Powell memo, right? It's been heading this way, and it's been a bipartisan effort, and Trump is just the logical culmination of that. So hey, let's stay on the corruption train. So you know, we've established that Trump is basically a walking RICO case, and that everything he touches turns to shit. And, you know, despite all that, I think we've all been enjoying the World Cup, and the U.S. team had looked as good as any American side in years, advancing to the round of 16 with a win last week over Bosnia. But in that match, star striker Folarin Balogun drew a red card for a hard foul, earning a suspension for this week's elimination game against Belgium. Well, because he apparently didn't have anything more important to do, President Trump personally intervened, calling FIFA President Gianni Infantino, that's Italian for Johnny the Baby. Hold on, look at him. I want you guys to look at this. Johnny the Baby. Uncanny, looks just like the Boss Baby movie there. So anyway, back to things. So anyway, Trump demanded Infantino rescind the suspension of Balogun, and FIFA, an institution nearly as corrupt as the Trump organization, relented. The backlash was immediate and international, with UEFA, the top European governing body for the sport, calling it, quote, unprecedented, incomprehensible, and unjustifiable, saying it crossed a red line. Well, like I said, everything Trump touches turns to shit. The controversy ruined the American squad's mojo. Belgium routed the Stars and Stripes 4-1. Bryce, thoughts? You've been watching the World Cup?
Not really. No, I'm not a big sports guy. Although I catch the occasional, couple shots when I'm with the friends who have it on. But this seeing it in your rundown for today was my first time hearing about this story. But I mean, it fits perfectly in with the kind of mob boss mentality that the Trump administration has when it comes to everything. But it especially jives with the mob boss mentality of FIFA, as an institution. And so it makes perfect sense that Trump would be shifting his weight to try and bend the rules, to break the rules, to make sure that someone else who broke the rules is now able to break the rules some more. I mean, it's par for the course. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if there was more chicanery. I mean, I heard about the Iranian team being kind of harassed by Americans on their visa policy, and them having to fly out of the country every day and then having to fly in when they were playing. I mean, it's just putting the finger on the scale, but also just wanton cruelty and insanity. This is the Trump administration that we all know.
Yeah, I've been enjoying the World Cup. It is one of the few things that I think the whole world sort of enjoys, and it's been nice to sort of be part of the larger global community in a way for these last several weeks. But again, just ruining something that should be joyous. Speaking of which, Republicans can't stop exploiting sport for political gain. The one thing that could bring us all together, sullied by their culture war slop. Wednesday, a group of GOP lawmakers sent a letter to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, warning the league could face federal federal civil rights scrutiny from the DOJ, Department of Labor, or the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission over what they describe as repeated physical violence against Indiana Fever star Caitlin Clark. The letter was led by Congressman August Pfluger of Texas and co-signed by Indiana Representatives Aaron Houchin, Victoria Spartz, and Marlon Stutzman, along with 7 other white lawmakers. Put a pin in that. Stutzman invoked a racial dog whistle, accusing Clark's opponents of, quote, thug-like violence. A segment of her fan base has a history of engaging in racial harassment of black players, though Clark herself has consistently disavowed such behavior, saying last week, quote, I think people using my name in ways that are inappropriate is frustrating. You don't know me. You don't know who I am. End quote. This while defending Phoenix Mercury player Alyssa Thomas, who has received vile messages and death threats after committing a hard foul on Clark during a game last month. The Fever organization said neither they, quote, nor Caitlin have had any interaction with this congressional group, and we were unaware of their letter. Lauren, this one right at home. The Fever practice right there in Fishers. Is that in your district or right next to your district there?
I did not realize they practiced in Fishers.
Yeah, they got a big practice facility out there, apparently.
Oh, okay. Is that the new one? That might be the new one, yeah.
I believe so, yeah.
I love the WNBA. I'm a huge Fever fan, and I actually used to have season tickets. So this one was not surprising, but it irritates me quite a bit. The WNBA, as we all know, is primarily made up of Black women that play in the league. And there are a few, white players. And we happen to have 2 of the ones that are in the headlines the most right now. We have Sophie Cunningham and we have Caitlin Clark. And both of them have been put in this political light. And I don't know if we should necessarily be politicizing this situation, but it's also not lost on me that our Republican representation is going after civil rights issues aimed towards the white person on the team, which is, they use this language on purpose. Anytime that you're putting something like thug-like violence when you're speaking about, primarily Black women, it's not being done on accident. And they're coming out and they're speaking these words on purpose, and they're making it volatile on purpose. And they're trying to politicize something that in reality has more to do with the fact that Caitlin Clark is young and she just entered the league and she's a really good player. Now, I definitely think, this is a personal opinion, there is, too much violence in the WNBA right now. And I do think that they need to get that in check, but that has nothing to do with politics. That's just the state of the WNBA right now. Poor Caitlin keeps getting attached to all of these different, things, her fans getting involved in, racism and just genuinely being bad, especially at Gainbridge. I've been at Gainbridge several times when this stuff has happened. And it seems like she's really trying to take a step away from that and, just be a basketball player and not a politician. This also just highlights, again, I say all the time, it's not necessarily about what our Republican legislators are doing. It's about what they're not doing. So they're spending their time on writing letters about Caitlin Clark to the WNBA commissioner. Meanwhile, we have a, bigger fish to fry, so to speak. We have a lot more things that we should be prioritizing and working on that we aren't. And we're wasting our time on stuff like this.
Well, it goes back to what you were talking about earlier. It's the distraction. It's, hey, fight with each other while we're picking your pockets. You fight over, in the grand scheme of things, inconsequential things like basketball. Right now, yeah. Of course, Indiana's culture wars go far beyond the basketball court, and ground zero may very well be the office of Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith. And once again, he has insulted the world's 2 billion Muslims and anybody else with a sense of decency. An interview from late last month with Blaze Media podcast host Daniel Horowitz had largely gone unnoticed until Friday, when the Chicago chapter of CARE, that's the Council on American Islamic Relations, issued a statement condemning Beckwith's remarks therein. So Indiana's elected lieutenant governor said Islam is, quote, actually a more dangerous ideology than even Nazism, and not a religion, but a military and political ideology. End quote. Now, this reiterates his position and also that the state ban public calls to prayer and investigate mosques. He also falsely claimed that the 2022 Supreme Court Kennedy versus Bremerton ruling established that Christianity takes precedence over all other faiths. And all of this is bad enough, but we also learned Friday that Beckwith will deliver remarks at what organizers are billing as the nation's first mass deportation rally to be held in Fishers August 1st and headlined by former Customs and Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino. Bovino claims the true number of undocumented immigrants in the U.S. is, quote, closer to 100 million, and that's roughly 30 times the official estimate. And his own promotional materials quote him saying they represent a greater threat to American society than violent criminals or terrorists because they, quote, don't care about your history, customs, values, or beliefs, end quote. Lauren, that is not a dog whistle. That is a bullhorn with the siren.
Yeah, and the fact that it's happening in Fishers is appalling to me. I just found out about this morning, and a future constituent reached out to me and shared their concerns specifically about this, and asking if we were going to make a public statement regarding this and saying that, we don't support it. Of course, I do not support this. I'm the granddaughter of an immigrant. I believe that immigrants make America great. We built this country on immigration. And this future constituent also, told me a story about how in Hamilton County, long time ago, we had several people step up to the plate and they, ended the KKK group that was in our area at the time. So we'll do it again this time around. It's frustrating that the first, racism rally on this tour or whatever it's going to be is in Fishers of all places, which was just named one of the top 5 places to live, by the way. So very weird that we're having this year. But yeah, we'll have to see if they'll leak the information about where it will be and see if there are going to be any counter protests or anything like that. But it's also interesting to me that this is a paid event and you have to apply to be able to get into the event. So you have to basically out Nazi the other Nazis to make sure that you're enough of one to be able to show up to this event. And there's, a $500 VIP dinner and a $50 invitation only ticket and all this stuff. So they're trying to keep it so that, regular people can't go. And if I had enough money, I'd buy every ticket and then nobody would show up. But yeah, this is...
It'd be a shame if they got flooded with so many requests that they couldn't keep up with them all. And now Bryce, to his comments about, one of the world's major religions, again, he just did this last month. Micah Beckwith should be impeached. This is not acceptable behavior for an elected official, period.
I mean, in a perfect world, he'd be a lot more than impeached. I mean, I think he should be, brought before an audience of normal people and pelted with like small rocks for hours or something. Like he deserves, whatever ill fate awaits him in hell. Like he is not a good person, and honestly I'm torn.
He can room with Lindsey Graham when he gets there. I was
about to say he can room with Lindsey Graham, and he can make room for Mitch McConnell when he finally makes his way downstairs.
Let me introduce you to my ladybugs.
But I'm torn between like being outraged at this stuff and just like ignoring it while understanding that these guys are evil incarnate. Because at some point it gets exhausting. He had this with the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. He would say something, and people would be like, "Oh my gosh, that's so bad! Isn't it so evil?" And then he would just keep saying this stuff, and it's like, well, okay, yeah, we all know it's bad, but what are we going to do about it? And it's the same with Micah Beckwith. It's like, okay, yes, I mean, you could tell me that he said some other horrible stuff, and I would totally believe it. You could tell me that he believes that. All Muslims should be summarily executed in Indiana. Of course, he probably believes that. But
give him a couple months.
What are we going? Did he say that? Did I miss this?
Oh, well, no. Spot him a couple months. I'm sure he'll get there. And
absolutely.
he implied in this interview with the Blaze, that's the Glenn Beck's network, by the way. He suggested that Governor Mike Braun privately agrees with him, saying, quote, "I think the governor and I see eye to eye on this. I'm a little bit more of a lightning rod than he is." Now,
I think he's right.
Braun has not addressed the substance of his claims, only saying that he probably regrets his phrasing. Lauren, where is Mike Braun on this? We know he did not want Beckwith to be his running mate. That was a convention coup by far-right activists in the Republican Party. You know, all he has to do is come out and disavow these statements, and he won't even do that. Mike Braun makes jellyfish look like they have strong spines.
Yeah, well, I think that he needs to do a lot more than disavow it. And this kind of gets into what Bryce was talking about earlier. Like, what are we going to do about it? The reality is we can sit here and we can talk about, how frustrating these things are and how lawmakers should impeach Micah Beckwith. I mean, we definitely have a reason to impeach Micah Beckwith. Now, we have a lot of seats to flip before we can impeach Micah Beckwith, but the type of energy that we need from the Democratic Party right now is, people that are not going to get up there and make a committee to make a plan about making a plan. We need somebody to actually do something about it. We need to elect people who are willing to go into the state house and to say, stand 10 toes down and say, we are going to try and impeach Micah Beckwith for these insane comments that he's making about, people that live in this community. And, the reality is words can be dangerous. And so I believe that, public officials and anybody in an elected position has a responsibility to make sure that they are providing the truth and that they are not instigating things that can genuinely become dangerous. Hate crimes end up increasing after comments like these. And we need to finally have people in office that, we have a side that is not playing by the rules. We have a side that is out there instigating violence. And we have to be willing to, stop trying to do everything so quietly and so by the book. We need to have people going in there and saying, enough is enough. This isn't right. These people need to not be in power any longer. They are destroying our state. They are destroying our country. And we need to take this seriously for, what it is and have people really stand up and do something about it. So I feel that way about Micah Beckwith. I feel that way about Mike Braun. I feel that way about a lot of different people. And, I hope that as we have more Democratic participation in the state, that will also come hand in hand with, less Democratic establishment people who want to keep things quiet and do things quietly and slowly, because we need change and we need it now. So that was a very long-winded way to explain. I don't like Micah Beckwith very much. I don't like what he says, and I think he should go.
Braun, Beckwith, Banks, the Killer Bees, Todd Rokita, these guys are an embarrassment to Indiana. They make all of us look bad, and they all need to go, and all Hoosiers need to loudly reject this sort of hate and ignorance. So, we talked about Bovino, right? Which I also believe is Italian for Greg the Cow. He came to infamy as the face of these ice raids in Minnesota this winter that, among many travesties, resulted in the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy by federal agents. Now, the resulting public outcry led Trump to replace Bovino with border czar Tom Homan and fire their boss, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, in favor of Mark Wayne Mullen. The shakeup promised, if not a kinder and gentler ICE, a more restrained and less overtly violent agency. Well, the reprieve appears to be over. A late June surge in ICE activity resulted in over 10,000 arrests in a period of just 5 days. And then this week, tragedy. In Houston, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, a Mexican national who spent 35 years in the city building homes and sending his 3 American citizen sons to college, was shot and killed by an ICE officer Tuesday during a vehicle stop in the city's historically Mexican-American Magnolia Park neighborhood, the 8th death from encounters with federal immigration officials since the start of the second Trump administration. Not to mention all of the many deaths that have occurred in custody. Now, as they've done in other cases, DHS says the victim attempted to ram agents with his vehicle. There is no video evidence of this, despite the department having been granted $20 million for body cameras. None of the officers in this incident had one on, but there were witnesses. 3 men in the van with Araujo, including his brother and 2 other construction workers. All 3 were detained by ICE and are reportedly being pressured to self-deport, removing the only known eyewitnesses to the shooting before they can give public accounts of what happened. Criminal justice reform expert Radley Balco told the New Republic, quote, "You don't pressure witnesses to a shooting to self-deport. If your goal is to get to the bottom of what happened, you pressure them to self-deport when you want to make sure that nobody learns what actually happened." Bryce, this disgusting words don't have can't describe it. I'm infuriated. I'm devastated for this man's family.
No, absolutely. It's the, again, logical endpoint of what these policies the Trump administration has been implementing are going to lead to. And, you know, the rollback of ICE in Minneapolis after, you know, the murder of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, you know, that rollback, that step back was largely a PR move designed to get ICE out of the headlines of the national press. You know, where they said, you know, maybe tone down the harassing, tone down the murdering of the people, tone down the the bombastic headlines that your activity is generating, but keep up the work. The ICE recruitment, that hasn't stopped. The ICE harassment of people, that hasn't stopped. The ICE abductions and detentions of people, that hasn't stopped. They're slowed down and reversed some of their expansion of the warehousing of people, but that hasn't stopped. They're still slowly expanding the capacity, and the funding to ICE certainly hasn't stopped. They're still being funded at astronomical levels. So while the first wave of, you know, anti-ICE action earlier this year was correct and moral and just, it was ultimately unsuccessful in stopping ICE and stopping and getting the state and getting the federal government to restrain ICE. So this is what you get. You get more deaths. You can read headlines, I think, last week about the Trump administration putting a ICE raid quota, trying to get X thousand arrests a day. This is the end point. This is what ICE is here for. And murdering people who and saying that they were ramming them is the goal. Now, I do want to caution people a little bit. The body cams line is always trotted out when there's a police atrocity and there's no accountability. But I recommend people read a great book by Alex Karakatsanis, who wrote the book Copaganda. And in it, he shows that body cams really, you know, while being pitched as a tool to hold police accountable, as a way to, give the public an input into how they're policed, in reality, they serve as a tool to greater surveil people and act as a boondoggle, a multi-million-dollar giveaway to the company Axon that makes a lot of them, the same company that makes tasers and a bunch of other police equipment. And so, you know, when I see there were no body cams, we need more money for body cams, we need more training for body cams, it does set off alarm bells that this might be just a way to, get more funding to ICE, to say, hey, well, we just need ICE to be trained better. We just need ICE to have better equipment. We just need to pour $100 million into making ICE nice. Well, this, of course, is not the correct solution and only serves to entrench this highly technical, highly oppressive, armed goon service on behalf of the most racist, rich people in the world.
Yeah. Oh, but wait, there's more, right? That's not even the only instance of federal law enforcement fatally shooting somebody this week. In Memphis, 2 Tennessee National Guard soldiers deployed to the city under Trump's federal crime fighting program fatally shot 20-year-old Tyron Johnson early Sunday after he allegedly turned toward them with a gun during a foot pursuit downtown. You know, heavy emphasis on the allegedly there. These troops shouldn't be deployed in American cities at all. And violent crime in Memphis and dozens of other Democratic-run cities has dropped significantly since a pandemic high, predating and running parallel to these deployments, undermining any stated justification for the federal intervention. And then just 4 days later, a DEA agent serving a drug warrant shot and killed another person in Memphis. That marks the 4th death involving the so-called Memphis Safe Task Force since it launched in September. Lauren, it seems like they're sending this heavy police presence into heavily black and brown areas.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that they tend to do. I always find it interesting when we create a task force to go in and enforce something. And again, the outcome is not what the spoken intended purpose was. It makes you kind of wonder why exactly they're doing it. And, going back just a tiny bit to what's going on with ICE in general, anytime that you create, we'll call it what it is, a private army or, a Nazi group, and you create the conditions where the types of people that want to sign up to be in ICE right now are not the type of people that are doing it because they want to create, safety, or, maybe in the back of their minds, they believe that's why they're doing it. But essentially what I'm saying is, if you create a task force for right-wing people to go out and carry out right-wing tasks like murdering, black and brown people and murdering anybody who speaks Spanish, or being able to do things and escape accountability, which is exactly what we've seen time and time again. They know if they go out and they kill somebody, the administration is going to come up with a story and they're going to cover it up and they're going to cover for them. But anytime you create a task force like this, you're going to have people signing up that want to carry out those tasks. And I think that's the reason that, people aren't saying abolish ICE because we think that we should have absolutely no border protection and no border, enforcement. People are saying we need to abolish ICE because it's a group that was created for people that have the same ideology that the Nazis had. And now we have a group of armed militia that carries out these types of tasks. There's no way to, fix it from the inside and overhaul a system that is this badly broken. I mean, it's literally created. And then we have, human rights issues happening as well. And this comes back to my exact point about we need to support our Democrats, but we also need to hold them accountable. And we need to ask them, what are you doing about this? I'm running for a state house seat. What I can do at the state house is I can try and make sure that any policy that I pass or anything that comes across my table isn't going to be putting more of our money into, assisting this group of people when they come into Indiana. That's about as much as I can do from the state perspective. So we really need to be going to our federal lawmakers and we need to be asking them, you're saying that you don't support ICE and that we need to abolish ICE, but what are you doing to actually make that happen? We can't just put another, small regulation on top and hope that it fixes the issue, which is that these people are doing it for racist reasons and they're doing it to be bad people. There's no way to fix that system from the inside. So, and now we have more federal agencies that are, causing problems as well. So we need to get a handle on this. I think that any time that a federal agency kills a citizen for a reason that is not right, it needs to be taken seriously. And we need to start doing something about it rather than just talking about it. We got to actually do something. We got to pass a policy. We have to put a stop to it.
And not enough Democrats are even saying abolish ICE, especially those in leadership. It needs to be a litmus test. If you want to go to Congress, you need to be advocating for this. And it is not an unpopular position. I think the vast majority of Americans want to see ICE either abolished or greatly reformed, like torn down to the studs and built in as something else at the very least. So, and I'm glad you mentioned, these folks are essentially carrying out Nazi ideology. They're carrying out fascism in our streets. And it's the same way that, the Nazi party in Germany had paramilitary organizations before gaining state power. Once they achieved state power, they brought those folks into the fold and, gave them the cover of the government and protection by the state. And we're really far down the rabbit hole at this point. And, unfortunately, it seems like the only thing we can do is our best hope of stopping all of this, everything we've spent the last hour talking about, is with Democrats taking control of Congress after November's midterm elections. And even with extreme gerrymandering in the wake of the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act, they remain favored to take the House of Representatives, but the Senate has always been an uphill battle. Now, a couple major developments on that front this week. First, Sunday, Michigan State Senator Mallory McMorrow dropped out of the Democratic primary race there, narrowing the field to establishment pick Representative Haley Stevens and progressive Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. McMorrow did not endorse either candidate. The seat being vacated by the retiring Gary Peters is a must hold for Democrats. Lauren, you been paying attention to our neighbors up there in Michigan?
Yeah, a little bit. It does get hard on the campaign trail to be, watching all of the other campaigns as well. Of course, you follow as much as you can. But this was new to me. I hadn't seen this one. I've been following Dr. Syed's campaign a little bit. And it seems like he's doing pretty well as well. It looks like progressive candidates are doing pretty well, across the board, and broken record here. But I think it's because they're willing to speak out about the things that everybody's thinking about, that, a lot of people seem to be towing the line on. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense that there haven't been any endorsements, and it'll just kind of be whoever the primary voters decide we'll get behind and, support them as best we can. But I didn't see why McMorrow dropped out of the race, though.
She tanked in the polls.
I think
early on. Well, but I wonder if there isn't some back channel pressure for her to drop out, thinking that might help Stevens, who says Haley Stevens, that Israel comes to her in her dreams. Bryce, does Israel come to you in your dreams?
It does, but I don't think in the way that she's talking about. It's a waking nightmare every day reading about what happens in Israel, and it's a waking nightmare reading about all these insane, fanatical Israel supporters in the American government. In fact, Haley Stevens, the only thing that I knew about her, and probably 60% of what I currently know about her today, is that quote, is that whole, I am ready to fight in the U.S. Congress for the people of Israel, and Israel comes to me in my dreams. Like, what a freak of a person. Not only to say that at all when you're trying to run for Americans, trying to get their votes, but also to say that while Israel's committing genocide, while Israel is, shooting children in the head, detaining congressmen, while Israel is, occupying all of its neighbors, while Israel is bombing Iran, bombing Syria, threatening Turkey, like all of this stuff. The fact that she thinks that that's an okay thing to say speaks not only to her, whatever weirdness, but also the degree to which Israel and its politics and Zionism in general has captured the American political system. Now, we don't want to externalize it too much. Most of the hyper-Zionist political actors in America are Americans. They're not, foreign actors. They're firmly
and Christians. Yes.
Yeah, and they're Christians too. But I mean, it's just so astounding that this ideology has been able to latch itself on to the point where people think they can say this stuff. I mean, remember, was it Ted Cruz talking about how, I would fight for Israel every day. The whole reason I joined the Senate was so I could fight with Israel, or fight for Israel. Like people saying these things, like what's his name was wearing an IDF uniform on the floor of the U.S. Congress. I mean, it's astounding. It's
only what Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate. He's my number one goal as Senate leader is to ensure Israel has everything they need for their defense. Sorry, that was my Schumer. But
it's what
Israel comes to her in her dream. The people of Michigan come to her in real life, hat in hand, say, "Help us." Right? Like where AIPAC is going to spend at least $30 million on this race to elect Stevens in Michigan. I hope they wind up just setting their money on fire. So that's Michigan. Now, and that, like we said, that is a seat that Democrats need to hold. But to capture the Senate, it's going to take just more than holds. Democrats are going to have to win Republican seats. And that just got a whole lot more difficult this week in Maine. On Monday, Politico published explosive, credible, documented allegations by a former partner of Democratic Senate nominee Graham Plattner, accusing the controversial progressive firebrand of entering her home uninvited in late 2021 and forcing himself upon her despite repeated objections. Within minutes of the story dropping, Plattner denied the allegations, but acknowledged the, quote, political reality it will inflict, and said he would be taking the time to reflect on the best path forward. One-time supporters did not give him much time. Within hours, the dam broke completely, with all corners of the party calling on him to drop out, rescinding endorsements. He officially announced Wednesday he is doing so, and the main Democratic Party voted the same day to hold an impromptu nominating convention to choose a new candidate. Potential replacements include former state Senate President Troy Jackson, former state CDC Director Nirav Shah, Maine Beer Company founder Dan Kleben, and Secretary of State Shenna Bellows. Bryce, this one, big story this week.
No, it's very big news, and this story about Graham Plattner is it's very disturbing, but it's certainly something that, given his background as a PTSD-addled military vet who joined Blackwater even after the Iraq War stuff, and there were all sorts of stories from his own mouth of him acting insanely while he was under the influence of alcohol. And so I firmly believe that, his victim, that she was assaulted by Graham. And I also firmly believe Graham Plattner that he wouldn't remember it because he was just in a state of mind that was just so whacked out. But I mean, zooming out beyond the individuals here, the main reason that many of these political actors, like the near attendants, like the right wing of the Democratic Party, are seizing on this isn't because that they're anti-rape. Let's be clear about that. These people support some of the worst policies in the world. These people saw Israel rape people on television, debate about it in the Knesset, whether or not it was okay to rape Palestinians. And they said, we still support Israel. We love Israel. These people supported Joe Biden, who was credibly accused of sexually assaulting Tara Reid. And they said, well, we don't care. We have political priorities. These people supported Bill Clinton, who, known sexual predator. So, let's be clear that these people who are rejoicing that Graham Plattner has been defeated and now using that to launch a full broadside against the left, they're not concerned about the actual crimes that Plattner allegedly committed. They're not concerned about the well-being or the health of his victims. They are political actors cynically using this as a political ploy. And even some of the people involved in bringing this story to light are themselves political actors. I mean, the consultant who connected these victims with Politico did so, knowing full well what the political implications would be, and knowing that this would enhance her own stature within the right wing of the Democratic Party. And the victim herself understood the political implications of this when she said that the first time she brought the story to, I believe it was the New York Times, she left out these details, putting them on background. But she only came to Politico with this when she saw that the political impact of this story was not damaging enough to Graham Plattner. So, this isn't a defense of Graham. This isn't a defense of him and his, acts of violence against women. And this is an attack on his victims. It's an understanding that the political system is able to use these stories, use these victims cynically to achieve something that is ultimately pretty poor for the nation. Because Plattner's politics, which is what I knew him for. I didn't know much about the person until, about a month ago. But Plattner's politics are very good on paper. Things to quibble with on the edges, but ultimately populist, pro-Medicare for all, anti-Israel, anti-any aid to Israel. Well, that politics is a major threat to some of the people in the party. These people in the party who have demonstrated time and time again that they are willing to lose not only the Senate and the House, but also the presidency. They are willing to lose rather than have someone who's genuinely with a transformative politics get into power. This was shown against the Bernie Sanders in 2016 when polls showed that he would beat Trump. Again in 2020 when showed that he would beat Trump over Biden. This was shown all over the place. I mean, it's a regular thing for these people because they don't care about winning. They don't care about right or wrong. They don't care about the well-being of the people. They care whether or not they personally and their cronies are going to be able to maintain power and influence within Democratic Party politics.
This whole thing infuriates me so much, not because I was a fan of Plattner. Like, I never went out there and like vociferously defended this guy. You know, there were red flags, and I admit to having brushed them away. But I was never 10 toes down for this dude, because it's never about the individual. It can't be about the individual. You have to view all politicians with suspicion. It was about the message, and Plattner had a good message, and it infuriates me that the messenger, being the kind of person he is, will set the movement back. And folks, like you talked about, these establishment hacks will use the fact that the messenger is a horrible person to attack the message itself. Lauren, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree exactly with what you just said there. I really enjoyed some of his viewpoints. A lot of the stuff that I'm running on is very similar. This idea that hard work should be enough again. But when I see something like this, I always put the policy over the person, and what they've done. And I think that this, him stepping down so quickly is a reflection on where we are right now as a party. And we would require accountability for this type of thing. And I guess all I can say, I agree with what you both have said. I want to see more accountability like this moving forward. When we have credible allegations against people in positions of power, I think that we need to take them seriously, and we need to hold, people accountable in this way. It also stinks because, again, like, it is now an attack on this progressive ideology. We have progressive people that are willing to do these horrible things. Maybe the platform itself isn't good, which, I mean, obviously makes absolutely no sense, but that's how people will spin it. We can elect a felon as the president, and who also has, even more credible allegations against him when it comes to things like this. But that's not a poor, that's not a poor reflection on the Republican Party, of course. But this is going to be a poor reflection on democratic socialism as a whole. And so I think that that's really unfortunate, but I do appreciate that accountability is being had. And I think that this is what we should demand of everybody that has, credible allegations against them, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And Bryce mentioned Neera Tanden saying something to the effect of, well, at least the establishment vets our candidates. No, you'll trot out people like Bill Clinton, like Andrew Cuomo, like countless other establishment figures who have had allegations against them, as long as they serve the corporate interests. But
these people knew that Anthony Weiner was sexting underage girls for years. Like the Clinton world knew, and like they did nothing. Like they don't care about that.
No.
Yeah, so they can kindly stuff it. This is a reflection on one man and his bad behavior, and not on the message. And to that point, I think, listen, he has foregone any ability to influence who the choice is. But the smart choice is somebody who will carry on the popular message that won that primary overwhelmingly by like 70%, despite the fact that Plattner had all of those existing red flags. So Plattner's political career, rightfully, is dead. As for Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell, yeah, we're not sure. The former Senate Majority Leader has been hospitalized since June 14th after reportedly suffering cardiac arrest and requiring CPR at his Washington home. Now, McConnell is 84 years old and suffers from a myriad of health problems, and despite what you've seen on TV and in the movies, CPR is a gruesome last-ditch effort, with the chances of someone in the senator's situation making a full recovery much less than 10%. McConnell's office says he's continuing to improve and working closely with staff on Senate matters. Current Senate leaders John Thune and John Barrasso, as well as CNN commentator Scott Jennings, say they've each spoken with him on the phone for about 20 minutes this week. But this has not been independently verified, with some reports suggesting McConnell may, in fact, be brain dead and on life support. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, a Democrat, sent a letter Wednesday asking McConnell to publicly disclose his condition. GOP legislators in the bluegrass state have changed state law twice in recent years, specifically to limit Bashir's power to fill a vacancy, knowing that something like this may be coming. Instead of appointing a replacement, he can only call a special election, and if the seat doesn't come open until after August 3rd, it is uncertain whether a special election would run concurrently alongside the November general or if the seat would remain vacant until January. Lauren, given McConnell's career of parliamentary shenanigans, it would be appropriate for his last act on this planet to be to hold up the Senate with some sort of fuckery.
Yeah, I guess for lack of a better way of saying it, yeah, I mean, I really think here, I mean, the ball is kind of in Bashir's court. I'd like to see him do something. I'd like to see him stop waiting for, again, broken record for the fourth time. If this was happening on the other side, the special election would be held. There would be no question about it. There would be critique of it, but it would go through anyway. So, I'm interested to see what happens. I don't think that there's any world that exists where McConnell is alive for this long without making a public appearance when there is an entire conspiracy theory that he's dead. So, it's been a really long, how long has it been since he's been seen in public? We've just had these phone calls.
This happened almost a month ago.
Right. So, whatever. I'm not a conspiracy theorist and I won't claim to know anything because I don't, but, I think that we should call the special election. I think that we should start making some moves because, again, this would have already happened if it was on the other side. And we could play by the rules, but we need to start, stop calling him and asking him if he'll talk to you. He's not going to talk to you. Just do something about it. So
the memes around this, I know it's kind of morbid, but the memes around this have been hilarious this week. The whole "I spoke to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes" theme there have been many variations on it, many of which are like "I spoke to Mitch McConnell" and then the images of a Ouija board. Bryce, what's going on here, and what should the solution be? Obviously, the man is in no state to continue to hold a Senate seat.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he might be in a better state than Dianne Feinstein was at the end of her tenure on this in the Senate. But I first caught on to Mitch McConnell's absence during the War Powers Resolution vote for Iran. I was looking at the rolls. I was like, wait, this thing passed? Fascinating. Who was gone? And I saw Senator Mitch McConnell. I was like, whoa, Mitch McConnell isn't like jumping at the chance to prolong a war that he loves. Interesting. And so then a few days later, I actually I said, I have a feeling that Mitch McConnell's gonna die here pretty soon. And then 2 days later is when those stories dropped of Laura Loomer saying, "Oh, he's brain dead. He's out of commission. He's in a coma." And then the news articles started coming. So I felt like I read the tea leaves pretty well. But what you do about it? He's not coming back. If he does come back, it'll be like, it won't be Mitch McConnell. It'll be Mitch McConnell's body. And that's why are we pretending any otherwise? And so the Republicans, I think they have a vested interest in propping up Mitch and trying to get the most they can out of his corpse, out of the existence of his corpse before he goes. But we shouldn't restrict this to any party, really. This gerontocracy issue has been. If you've been following someone like Ken Klippenstein, who has been doing great work at his newsletter, he's been talking about this issue on all sides for a while. He's been talking about Maxine Waters. He was talking about Dianne. He was talking about all these people who are running around Congress in diapers, unable to, know what's on their schedule. It's like, weekend at Bernie's for all of these people. And like this is a problem with our political system and the incentives that guide it. Like, you would think that a political system would be incentivized to have smart, strong, healthy individuals making all the decisions for the country to better the world for everybody. No. The incentives as it stands now is to lie about these things, is to hide it for their staff to pretend like, oh yes, no, he'll be right out. He'll be okay. Like, these incentive structures are so cooked. And it's indicative of a lot of these different incentives incentive structures in our American system that reduce or that result in just adverse, insane outcomes. So the Walking Dead is another one of these outcomes.
I mean, there's something to be said for life experience, but at some point you become so old that you're completely out of touch with how other people live their life. Chuck Grassley is still in the Senate. You know how old Chuck Grassley is? He's 206. Like, so many of these people.
They brought out what was it? Oh God, the guy who wrote the anti-Wall Street bills. They brought out him to talk about
Barney Frank.
Frank. Yes. They brought out Barney Frank, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm moving into a retirement home soon. But here's what I think the future of the Democratic Party should be." It's like, what? Yeah. We need life experience, not death experience.
And it was so many of these folks. This gerontocracy. Any of them could drop at any minute. And to that point, woke up to this morning. We've mentioned it a couple times already, but overnight, longtime South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham passed away after what they're calling a brief and sudden illness. He was only 71. Had just returned from a trip to Ukraine a couple days ago. From Iraq to Russia to Iran, Graham never met a war he didn't like. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster will appoint an interim successor, and Palmetto State Republicans are expected to hold a special primary to find a new nominee for November's election by August 11th. Bryce is surprised. This one came out of the blue, but Lindsey has always been sort of a subservient, a sub to a more powerful Republican. I think he has to go prepare Mitch McConnell's room in hell and get it ready for him.
No, that's exactly what happened. And you're right. This one was very unexpected, right? Lindsey Graham is actually pretty healthy. I mean, he's fueled by hate and the blood of innocence. So he's got a lot of that on his hands. And he was actually, I think the day before they announced his death, or maybe 2 days before, there was video of him acting spry and shaking hands with Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. This is pretty sudden, and it's not clear what exactly happened. Many people have, speculations about who or what might be behind this. But the fact is that he's a ghoul, and the world is certainly better off without him. And anyone who wants to clutch their pearls at the fact that people are celebrating the death of a piece of shit, they can clutch harder, because I'm going to be celebrating from the rooftops. He's right up there with, like the Kissingers and like the other evil people, Reagan. Like, he deserves every bit of hate that he gets in death. In fact, he deserved it more in life when it could affect something, but we don't have that luxury anymore. He's dead. The world is better. Let's move on.
I wish I could have had some lead time on this. I would have prepared a bottle of champagne. Lauren, what's behind this? The Grim Reaper was in the neighborhood and thought he could get a twofer. But Lindsey Graham was a sniveling little toady. In 2016 on Trump's way up, he called it. He said that Trump was like a race-baiting, xenophobic bigot, and if Republicans elect him, they would lose, and they deserve to lose. And then, after Trump won the election, he became one of his biggest supporters, towing the party line at every point. Just one of the worst people of the generation.
Yeah, I feel like they just kind of, well, first of all, I think it's important to talk about the fact that 71 is definitely not that young. I understand that it's younger than most of the other people that have passed away, retiring from our government, but I would not be opposed to having, a retirement age, because the work that's being done isn't, a joke. We need to have people there that are mentally fresh. And, like the FAA has mandatory retirement at the age of 65. I don't think that it necessarily would be, we should not have people dying on the floor of old age. I think that this is a unique experience that we have, here in the United States, where, people get elected and they just don't ever leave. They're just there forever. They're there until, they have a medical emergency, and then they come back 2 weeks later, and then they have another medical emergency, and then they come back 2 weeks later. And now we haven't seen them in a month, and we don't know if they're alive or dead. That should not, at a position that is this important and this high up, this should not be a game that we're playing. This should not be we shouldn't be wondering whether or not we have a representative that's even on this earth anymore, just because of old age and that kind of stuff.
It is, it is very much, a metaphor for the sclerotic American empire in its decaying state. And boy, it is time to reinvent ourselves as a country and reinvent our government. And it's going to take generations of new leadership to do so. Speaking of which, one place where we may actually see an infusion of new leadership is right here in Indiana. The deadline to caucus in candidates for uncontested races here in the Hoosier State passed this week, and we now fully know the lay of the land for November. So Indiana Democrats will field candidates in 97 out of 100 state House seats, including our friend Lauren here, and in 24 of 25 state Senate seats. This is the largest candidate field for Democrats in decades, and Republicans are actually leaving 20 Democratic incumbents unchallenged, mostly in Marion and Lake counties. Still, the GOP holds a 70-30 House majority and a whopping 40-10 advantage in the Senate. Democrats need to flip 4 House seats to break the Republican 2/3 supermajority, but I would say this is Indiana Democrats' best chance to do so in a long time. Lauren, how are you feeling about things going into November? The other candidates in your area, how are they feeling? I know you've got some right there in the Hamilton County area. A couple of those seats are ripe for the picking.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the privilege of, getting to run in Hamilton County, where we have a couple of candidates who are on the DLCC's list, which is incredible. It's super exciting. We get to work closely with each other, and I feel at least that we've kind of become a family, and we talk to each other a lot. We'll get out and we'll canvass together and do house parties together. But I think that we're all kind of feeling the same thing where, as I'm going door to door, people are making the comment that, I've voted Republican in the past because I didn't have anybody else to vote for. A Democrat hasn't run for this seat since 2020. So it's been 6 years, and there's been a redistricting cycle since then. So we haven't had anybody run in my district exactly how the layout is, which is why we don't have very good data right now. Everybody's talking about, the polls in these bigger congressional races, but we just don't have that kind of data at the state level, at least for my race as it stands right now. So it is unfortunate that we aren't contesting every single Senate seat now, because initially, we got to say this spiel of, we're contesting 97 out of 100 House seats and every single Senate seat. But we'll take all but one.
I talked to that but one just recently, a few weeks ago. That was Joe Bowman out in the Terre Haute area, and he dropped out of that race. I was to believe that there was somebody waiting in line to caucus in behind him, but it appears not.
Yeah. So that's unfortunate. However, everybody's talking about, the Democrats need to break the supermajority. And I 100% agree with the fact that we need to break the supermajority, but we have a lot of very highly energized candidates, a lot of very intelligent candidates, highly qualified candidates who have spent their work experience in areas that really matter to public service. And, in every conversation that I've had with the other Democrats that are running, we all seem to really be on the same page about the things that need to change and the things that need to get done. And as we're going door to door, we're hearing the same issues over and over again. So, the idea that Hamilton County alone could break the supermajority if we elect all of us into the state house, and we all, some of us have easier paths to victory than others, but it's going to be challenging for all of us, and we're all putting in the work. I think that we can do a lot better than break the supermajority, and we can finally give ourselves a voice. And we have a lot of people that feel the way that I do about getting in there and really getting something done, and not towing the line anymore, just actually saying what we mean and meaning what we say. So I'm excited to be able to, serve alongside, most of us in Hamilton County are women that are running. So we've kind of formed this sisterhood, but we all feel really good about it. We feel the momentum there. We feel the shift there. And it's something that, JD Ford talked about before he flipped his seat in, 2018. He said, I noticed that there was a shift happening and I capitalized on that shift. And we're seeing the exact same thing across the board, at an even higher level. We have an increase in Democratic participation in Hamilton County like we've never seen before. The Republicans lost support during the primary, whereas we had gained, I think the number was 300%. Don't quote me on that, but gained about 300% participation, increase in our primary. So we're seeing really good signs. And
it was well over 200. Yeah. And you guys there in Hamilton County Democrats, your chair, Josh Lowry, you guys are doing a fantastic job up there organizing. And it's going to be important just to sort of to pierce that bubble, to break the supermajority, to gain a seat here or there to show it can be done. And that'll sort of help maybe folks get more involved on the back end because, Bryce, maybe you could speak to this. We're fortunate down here in Monroe County where we generally have relatively decent governance, but in so many of these down ballot races across the state, there's still a whole lot of Democratic seats going uncontested, with Republicans just coasting after the primary.
Yeah, I mean, like this is one of the, like you say, the benefits of Monroe County. It's kind of like the inverse of the entire state, where there are races where Republicans aren't even, dreaming about taking, just because the political character of Bloomington and Monroe County writ large is just so much more progressive. But I mean, we're seeing that this progressive bubble, or at least this blue bubble, sort of expand a little bit. And within Monroe County, the city of Bloomington is a blue bastion, but right outside of Bloomington, then it becomes, increasingly purple to red. But one of the races that we're following closely here for Bloomington people is Amy Oliver's race, which is one of those races where, I'm fairly certain that it's like seriously competitive. Which, like, even leftists, like even progressives, are saying, well, how can we get involved in this? How can we ensure that we get this Republican out so that we break the supermajority? Because a lot of people didn't even understand why Indiana was so dismal to begin with, because most people aren't paying attention to state politics. Just on a person-to-person level, most people aren't paying attention. Most people aren't reading the news every day, right? So, like us three, we're freaks among normal people. Like we're watching this.
We are,
yeah.
We are political sickos. Yes.
Yeah, and so like the idea that, like, okay, well, why is Indiana so bad? They didn't understand that. Well, the Republican Party, who has a mission to murder as many puppies as possible, they have the ability to ram things through, even if the Democrats decide not to show up. And it's by their grace, by some less terrible Republicans' grace, that we're not like just straight up Florida right now, that we're not like, eliminating the property tax entirely, or that we didn't get the
there are plans to do so.
Right. I was just about to say.
They're trying it, but this is what people are starting to pay attention to now. They're saying, well, this psychopathic Trump supporting, Micah Beckwith loving, Braun loving, Rakita loving gang of assholes is going to be in charge of our entire state, and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, I think there is something we can do about it. And so they're getting more involved in these races, to the point where, like you said, all of these races, all but one, are not being left unchallenged, which is a positive development for the Indiana Democratic Party, which is a positive development for the lives of everyday people. So it'll be interesting to see how this translates into future electoral success. I think the midterm effect is going to be one of the biggest factors here. But then on a micro level, we'll see where the energy is, who's knocking doors, who's making calls, who's showing up to canvass, who's showing up with the bottles of water to help out their friends. I mean, this is where that race will be decided. And I am optimistic that we're going to be able to break the super minority.
Yeah, shout out to Amy Oliver, who you mentioned. That's my district. She's going to be my next state rep. Current guy, Dave Hall, totally sucks. Rubber stamp for about everything they want to do up there in Indianapolis. And we are, I think, reaching some sort of critical mass as the quality of life continues to decline here in the state because of a generation now of Republican leadership. Things like the following. Home stretch here. Let's talk healthcare. This week, new data was released showing the Affordable Care Act enrollment dropped by roughly 2.6 million people nationally since January, when enhanced premium tax credits expired, causing many Americans' monthly premiums to double or even triple overnight. Ohio and Oklahoma each lost over 32% of their enrolled population, the steepest drops in the country. Arizona, South Carolina, Minnesota, Michigan, Mississippi, Louisiana, Missouri, and Indiana lost more than a quarter of enrollees. The Trump administration attributed the decline to a crackdown on fraudulent phantom enrollment. Analysts say that's misleading, and the data clearly points to subsidy expiration and tightened immigrant eligibility as the primary drivers. Only one state saw increased enrollment, and that's New Mexico, which gained 14% more enrollees, the only state to fully replace lost federal subsidies with its own funds, demonstrating that the coverage loss elsewhere was a policy choice, not an inevitability. And ACA marketplace insurers are proposing another double-digit premium hike next year. Bryce, I want to throw this way back to the beginning. We were talking about the Iran war and the gas tax holiday here in Indiana and what that $500 million could be going to instead. Think about things like enhanced tax or premium subsidies here in Indiana like they're doing in New Mexico.
Right. I mean, like everything that is happening to us, like, people losing healthcare, people, dying from deaths of despair, people not getting the support they need, poor housing options, inflation, all of that is a policy choice by individuals. It's often described as just like a force of nature. Like, oh, there's inflation. Oh, people are going off healthcare. Oh, there's a tornado. It's hot. There's a hurricane. But no, these are decisions that people make with the full understanding of what they're doing. I don't think that the Republican Party and the people there, I don't think that they're in their meetings, they're saying, well, here's how we help everybody get health care. Let's cut everybody's health care. They're not saying that. They're saying we want to cut everybody's health care because we don't believe that they have the right to health care. We believe that they're freeloading off the system. We should trim the fat, and the fat is poor people getting things. It's what Trump said, we shouldn't do daycare. We shouldn't focus on daycare. We have wars to fight. We can't help people with their problems. We have wars to fight. We have people to kill. These are choices that don't need to be made. And when we're looking at other states, we don't even need to look at other countries, which we can, but we don't even need to look there. Other states are showing ways that you can use the powers at your disposal to make life better for people, and they're deciding not to. The cutting the gas tax, it's a subsidy for the public. It is a good, a positive thing in a vacuum. Or suspending the gas tax. It's a positive thing in a vacuum. You want the average person to have cheap fuel to be able to go places, be able to go to work, to contribute to the economy, to be able to do things, etc. But the only reason that we're getting it is because it's a Band-Aid on this far more insane policy of starting a war with Iran, not negotiating with them, restarting the war when we're claiming that we're negotiating. That's the policy that this gas tax is meant to be peppering over. And even then, when we take it out of the vacuum, the states are left holding the bag. Like, it's one thing if the federal government is saying, well, we're going to pay for all the lost gas tax revenue, just like we're paying for this the federal the strategic oil reserve drawdown. Like that's something that we as a country are going to do for you. They're not doing that. They're passing it on to the states. They're saying the states, you can figure out what to do with it. Come what consequences may. And that's the kind of callous disregard for the public that we can expect from these sorts of people.
And to your point, it's all about policy choices. We could be spending public dollars on things that benefit Hoosiers, and it's not just like, oh, they can do this in California or New York or Massachusetts where it's rich states. New Mexico is a poor state. It's about priorities and what you value. A couple more Indiana healthcare stories. So the Seventh Circuit sent a case back to district court Monday involving Planned Parenthood and their ability to receive Medicaid funds in the Hoosier state. A 2011 state law, which has been held up in court ever since, bars any organization that performs abortions from receiving federal funds. The federal ban on Medicaid payments to abortion providers expired on July 4th, but Indiana is not restoring payments. I mean, Planned Parenthood has been banned from performing abortions in the state since 2022, so this fight isn't even about abortion care. It's about whether the state will pay for things like birth control, cancer screenings, STI testing, and wellness exams done by a provider they don't like. The original judge has signaled she's inclined to lift her injunction, meaning Indiana's funding ban could soon permanently take effect. But one small bit of good news on the women's health front: the state Supreme Court this week unanimously let stand a December Court of Appeals ruling that terminated pregnancy reports. These are documents doctors are required to file about individual abortions, must remain confidential as protected medical records, blocking their release to the public. With the state's near total abortion ban having gone into effect in 2022, and so few procedures now performed here, releasing individual reports created a real risk of patient identification, even with redactions. Excuse me. Attorney General Todd Rokita's office is considering further appeals. Lauren, your thoughts there?
I mean, we decided that we can't do HIPAA violations, and I think that's a good thing. I actually just received news yesterday that I did receive the endorsement from Planned Parenthood. So I'm very excited to be able to be an advocate for them when I get to the state house, and just be a good partner to them and work with them. But I think that you hit the nail on the head here, talking about the fact that this feels like another smokescreen where we're talking about, cutting funding to any facility that performs an abortion. Well, that's very different from defunding abortions, because essentially the way that they see it, there's X number of dollars, right? And I say this a lot on the campaign trail. We see giving, benefits to the working class or to, the average Hoosier in the forms of SNAP benefits or access to health care, Medicaid and all these things that we're talking about. We see that as a handout. And we don't want to give money to those services. We don't want to give money to healthcare because it costs money to provide healthcare, right? So we have a situation where we don't, as a government, I'm not saying we as in I'm included, I'm saying our current government, they don't want to fund Planned Parenthood. They don't want to fund Planned Parenthood because STI testing costs money. Wellness exams cost money. Vasectomies cost money. And so what they do is they frame it in a vacuum, as Bryce was saying. They frame it in a vacuum where they say, well, we're not giving money to Planned Parenthood because, we don't give handouts, and taxpayer dollars shouldn't go to things like abortions, which is, a very volatile topic. We don't like to talk about, the fact that abortion is just healthcare. So we're going to we're going to say that we're defunding Planned Parenthood because the reality is we don't want to spend the money on it, because how are we going to give Amazon $8 billion since 2016 if we have to pay for, Planned Parenthood? So the reality is that they want you and me to believe that the true handout is the SNAP benefits and the Medicaid and the Planned Parenthood and the healthcare in general. The real handouts, again, they're getting us to look over here. It's the immigrant's fault, right? It's the woman that needs an abortion's fault. It's this person's fault. And we're also going to do crazy things like try and say that it's legal to have a HIPAA violation and just tell everybody that you got an abortion to try and convince you not to get one, even though we're not paying for it anyways. And meanwhile, while we're doing that, we're going to forego $633 million annually for these tax incentives for the data centers. So
Lauren,
it's just
well played. Well done. You set me up perfectly for our final story here today. And let's end with a series of stories on AI and the data centers that power it. So this week, several of the country's largest newspapers accused OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, of obstructing discovery in a landmark copyright infringement trial. The papers accuse OpenAI of hiding data sets and logs that could show it trained its models on copyrighted news content and lying to the court about their ability to search for that content. The core legal question is whether AI training on copyrighted materials constitutes fair use, a theory being tested in dozens of simultaneous lawsuits from news outlets, authors, visual artists, and music labels, with mixed results so far. But Let's look at the data centers that serve as the physical infrastructure behind these AI models. So out in Wyoming this week, Meta is accused of releasing a rare bacteria into Cheyenne's wastewater system during construction of a massive data center there. Here in Indiana, Indy Star told the story of several Lebanon residents whose lives have been turned upside down by the construction of Meta's massive 13-building data center campus in the city's Leap District. Hello, Facebook Live. In the capital city, DC Blocks, a Georgia developer proposing a $2 billion data center development in Irvington, announced plans to downsize their project after pushback from the community. Indy Star also published internal emails from city planners who last year initially opposed another data center development in the Martindale-Brightwood area before reversing course without explanation. And finally, Indianapolis City County Council President Maggie Lewis announced Friday she will introduce a moratorium on new data center approvals Monday at the Metropolitan and Economic Development Committee meetings as it considers the proposed zoning framework. This moratorium would pause approvals while the council, city administrators, industry experts, and community stakeholders evaluate long-term impacts, including infrastructure demands, utility capacity, environmental concerns, and neighborhood quality of life. The moratorium would not impact existing data center projects, however, including the two I just mentioned. Lauren, thoughts?
I mean, I agree with the moratorium until we have more information. I just recently watched a video, seeing that we have this, outbreak going through the water supply and all this kind of stuff. Like, this is the exact reason that we need to take a second and we need to look into what the impact is going to be. And I just saw a video of my current representative, Speaker Houston, talking about, none of the water that comes through is dirty and everything's recycled properly. And, it really doesn't use any of our water. And they're just getting up here and we keep hearing story after story about how this is not true. And we just have our government officials up there lying to us. And I guess I don't understand how in a democracy we can have every single person not want the data center to be going in, but the data center still goes in. And our government is, number one, they're not listening to us, but number two, it's a race to the bottom for them. They're saying, actually, come here and we'll give you the best tax breaks in the entire country. We'll give you the land for it. You don't have to pay these taxes. You can do, whatever you want. We'll help you pay for it. And, they don't create very many, permanent jobs. It's a drain on our resources. It's not good for the environment. And I think a moratorium is the least that we can do to give the taxpayers a minute to see how we can fight this better, because at the end of the day, it's our tax dollars. And this is the reason that we can't afford things like, funding Planned Parenthood and, ABA therapy for my niece who just lost it because of the cuts to the funding and all this kind of stuff. Like we can't afford to fix the roads, but we can afford to have a race to the bottom for Amazon to come here or for, all of these other companies coming here. And it's just come for cheap labor, cheap land, low taxes. And meanwhile, right, the working class is footing the bill, and it's frustrating.
It'd be one thing, Bryce, if they just paid their damn taxes.
Right. It'd be one thing if they were, providing some public benefit to all this. Because, right, in theory, economic development, you subsidize the businesses so that they bring in more than you're subsidizing. It's a win-win-win. But this is just the theory and usually doesn't end up anything like that. These data centers, they don't provide much in terms of actual social value, right? It's so that we can make these big porn and advertising copy machines that are known as LLMs. That's the biggest thing that they're going for. And even if this was this shitty business was profitable, it would still be bad. But it's not even profitable. Like, this is banking on the gambling of the major financial institutions, and these GPU companies and these AI companies. It's banking on their ability to one day be profitable, and that's bad enough. But then when you consider that this stuff is actively poisoning the people, the costs of that rise astronomically. Like, it's one thing to subsidize with money from the people that could be, going to whatever services. It's another thing to literally sacrifice your children on the altar of AI, give them asthma, give them parasites, give them hotter temperatures, so that, these AI porn advertising copy machines are able to just like have more space to move. Like this is an insane policy from the top down. And then when you layer on the NDAs that have to happen for this, when you layer on the fact that this consolidates political power in these entities, when you consider that we're in a housing crisis, in which municipalities really need to be learning about their land, it just becomes a raw deal for everybody. Anyone who's ever been in favor of these data centers in your towns, they should be thoroughly interrogated and looked at with distrust.
Yes, and this issue is increasingly cutting across party lines. Everybody that you talk to, they don't want these in their neighborhoods, and they're coming out, Democrat, Republican, Independent alike. And hey, it's bringing folks together. So maybe in that way, it's a positive. Let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. Bryce, where can the folks connect with you online? Hey, if they're in our area here in Bloomington, how can they attend a Bloomington DSA meeting?
So first, if you're in Bloomington, Indiana, please go look at the Bloomington DSA website. We have a lot of stuff going on. We've been growing exponentially over the last year and a half. Our membership has increased around 400% since January of 25. And the number of projects we're doing has increased by a similar factor. So we have meetings every first Monday, general membership meetings every first Monday at the First United Church on 3rd Street. Please show up and please get involved. I'll be there. Say hi. Say, I saw you on Scott's show. I love that. We both love that. But if you're not in Bloomington, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm still on Twitter. I'm, fighting that battle, I guess, at the Green BJ. You can just look up Bryce Green Twitter. It'll come up. And I also have a Substack that I post on occasionally, just called Bryce Green's newsletter. Stuff comes out on there occasionally as well. So please come and find me.
Very good. And Lauren, how about you? Where can folks find you? Maybe get some information about that campaign, donate, volunteer, all that good stuff.
Yes, so I am on pretty much every social media platform at Lauren Cole 4IN, and that's 4 spelled out FORIN. So that's on Facebook, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, all those kinds of things. My website is the same name, laurencole4in.com. And that's, again, 4 spelled out FORIN. And you should be able to find a ton of information about me and my platform on the website. There's a link to donate. We do have a fundraiser starting on the 14th. It's a match fundraiser. So I had some anonymous donors come together, and they're matching up to $5,000. So any donation that is made between the 14th and the 25th will be matched 100% up to $5,000. So
very good. So folks, jump on that. Help Indiana House Speaker Todd Houston have a problem. That was a good pun right there. So, of course, folks, you can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Send me a DM with feedback or email me at scott@whosleft.us. We can't do any of this without you. Please support our work with a paid subscription at progressiveindiana.net and follow us on social media there at the full spelled out name, Progressive Indiana Network, on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it's PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Once again, thank you to Lauren Cole and Bryce Green for joining us today. Donate and volunteer for Lauren if you're in her area. Consider joining Bloomington DSA if you're down here with me and Bryce. Like, share, comment, and leave a review for us. Let's keep building a radically democratic Indiana together. Until next time, I am Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.